Hi everyone, this is Dr. Liz, and you're listening to Include with Dr. Liz. This show is about everyone, all people, including you. It's about people and their diverse lived experience in this world. I chat with guests to get to know them, their identities, and their inclusion needs, so we all have an opportunity to understand how best to include them, so together we can create a world where everyone thrives. Jenny is a food-loving, weekend sleeper-innerer who is determined, diplomatic, curious, and always finds time for her friends. Even after failing high school, Jenny overcame self-doubt to graduate with both an undergraduate law degree and a Master's of Law later in life. Oh, and apparently public speaking keeps her up at night. Hey, Jenny, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to see you, Liz.
Now I need to ask, did you sleep last night, or do podcasts not count as public speaking?
Look, I did sleep last night. I was looking forward to this, and having watched some of your previous season 1 podcasts, it gave me a real reassurance of what this was about. And opposed to being public speaking where you're the focus of a room full of people, this was very much a conversation between you and I. And if other people are watching at a later stage and get something out of it, well, that's just great. But I feel as though I'm having a cup of coffee with you.
And as it should be. I often say, which I didn't say to you before we press record, so I often say, please don't try to give me the right answer, just give me yours, because that is the best answer. So yes, I want it to feel like a cup of coffee or a glass of wine on a Friday night.
And it does.
All right. So I'm glad that this didn't keep you up last night. And we should disclose to people that are listening is that we've known each other for several years. Jenny's coming in from where in Australia today?
I'm coming in from a very hot and humid Sydney.
Okay. So thank you for dialing in this morning, which is my evening that we're recording. Just like every other guest, you completed my questionnaire. There was a long list of identities and you ticked 3. What were they for you?
The 3 that I ticked, Liz, were female, working parent, primary carer, and ageing. On reflection, I sat back and I thought, gosh, there are more identities that describe who I am. And so I thought, well, those identities, they kind of have evolved over time. And I wrote them down and just sounded them out. And I landed on being Australian. I'm cisgender female. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a Christian. I'm a professional. I'm a spouse. I'm a mother. But I'm also working on becoming a dangerous old woman. And I know that's what we're going to be talking about today, but that is an identity that is starting to evolve, and I'm really embracing it.
Look, and you make a really good point, is that identity isn't a fixed thing. It's not something that we're just born with and that's it. There are some traits of us that are fixed, but a whole lot of them are acquired over time. And so disability can come in throughout our lives, chronic illnesses, and of course, the privilege of aging. So I know that you recently transitioned out of corporate life into self-employment. Now, I say this as a starting point is because in our questionnaire that we give to guests, it does ask you about how are your inclusion needs currently being met. And you scored 5 right across the board, like strongly agree. But I'm going to guess that is easy to achieve when you're self-employed. And
Absolutely.
Okay, so I kind of want to dig into that. The privilege of being self-employed means you can get your inclusion needs met in contrast to when you're an employee. So I want to ask, towards the end of that corporate career, would you have said all your inclusion needs were being met?
In my various iterations, and I've had a number of iterations from a professional perspective, I feel that the last one that I've had as an ESG professional, sustainability professional, I was very clear upfront before taking on that role that this would be my last corporate role, that this would be my transition out of the corporate workforce, and that I had certain expectations as to what that role would not only deliver to the business, but what it would deliver to me.
Mm.
And so I was, and this is where kind of the dangerous old woman comes in. The older you get, the more you speak your mind. You become confident in your own abilities and skills, and it's very liberating. I was very clear. I wanted flexibility. I wanted to work less hours so that I could focus on some study and think about my future. What would semi-retirement or retirement look like?
Mm.
And so it was pretty much for the first time in my life, I said, these are my needs. These are my inclusion needs. Those were met. And then the challenge for me has been ensuring that others get that same access, because there are others like me in that workforce that may not be quite so confident about speaking up and saying, this is what I want.
Now, I want to go back a bit then, because from memory, it was around the same time that we met that you were just transitioning into that
Mm.
role. And that's pre-COVID. So
Mm.
remote work maybe wasn't as common. Were those needs easily met by your employer, or was there a little bit of negotiation and influence on your part because of how long you'd been there as an employee?
I think it was a different experience for different people, to be honest. And I think this comes down to individual leaders and their approaches to leading and managing their teams and the level of trust that they have in their teams. I was very fortunate, and I think you're absolutely right, Liz, that I have been with the organisation for a long period of time, and so I had built up trust over that time, and it was known that I would do my job no matter where I was sitting. So, and again, I had started to work a couple of days from home pre-COVID anyway, so I knew the drill, and my employer, my leader, knew the drill. They knew what I was able to achieve working from home. For others, I know it was a different experience, and the uncertainty, the lack of control that some leaders felt they had over their team
Mhm.
because they could not see them for every moment of every day. It's not just the employer's obligation to make it work.
Mm.
It's also important that the employee do what they can to make it work. But there
Yeah.
needs to be an open dialogue, and there needs to be an open dialogue about some of these uncomfortable topics that a lot of corporates weren't accustomed to talking about. Flexible working, it's like, oh no, let's not go there. It's too difficult.
Absolutely. And, I mean, I think there are some cases that we need to thank COVID for, because it forced organizations' hands to practice something that they perhaps might have been pushing back on, and proved that it can work. It doesn't have to work, but it can work and can be leveraged really well. Now,
Mm.
I want to just still stick on to the aging in the workforce and the transitioning. You were talking about, what is, semi-retirement look like? What does retirement look like? Now, there's research to show that I'm not a fan of using the term generational terms, but I'm just going to go with baby boomers for now, because X generation are actually now starting to get into the semi-retirement phase, so that those that are ahead of the game. So we've got to be careful here now when we say these things. But there's research to show that they don't want to switch off the lights. They don't want it to go, I've been working 5 days and then tomorrow I want to do nothing. That they want to sort of step out gradually. So clearly you were in a position to be able to foresee that and start to plan for that and negotiate with your employer. Do you have any advice for organizations on how to leverage the value of employees that do have so much experience but don't want to just switch off the lights?
I'm not the sort of person that sits on my laurels and does nothing. I'm active, and I need to be kept busy. I'm not somebody that can sit still for too long. And so I knew that my transition to retirement needed to really contemplate um, ongoing learning and opportunities. So, looking at the opportunities that might come up as I'm given more time to pursue them. Um, Employers could really, I think, that they could harness and they could leverage their transitioning to retirement workforce by providing the opportunity for that workforce to get work part-time, so flexible working, providing them with access to services um, to consider and explore what are the things they enjoy doing. How could they do that at work as they're starting to look at retiring? So for me, it was like, I love mentoring. So, I was really constantly, annoying the HR department with, who can I mentor? Who can I mentor before I leave? And that kind of led me into coaching in the end. And that's probably another thing we'll talk about later on. But providing the space and the tools for people to explore life beyond work, but also giving them the opportunity to use those while they're still at work. So whether it's mentoring, whether it is having like lunch and learns where you can talk about navigating the corporate environment, which is something that, whether we like it or not, it's not going to change. There are always going to be challenges in navigating the corporate environment. And the wisdom of people who have done this for 40 plus years is absolutely invaluable.
Have you seen the human library concept? Have you seen those?
Yeah.
What if we did human libraries in our organization where people can just learn from others? Oh my goodness, we need to start that, Jenny.
It is perfect. The human library concept is would lend itself so beautifully to that. It would attract such a diverse audience. And it would create this space where people would talk openly about the different stages and phases of life without fear and with vulnerability as well, because there are so many phases, whether it's, a woman going off on maternity leave and what's life going to look like when I come back. I went through that.
So you just gave the example. Yeah, we could have people that are returning to work after having a baby. The thing is, if I tie that back to what you said earlier around flexible working, part-time for those that are aging and transitioning out of the workforce, if we have policies and procedures in place that enable flexible working based on life stage, regardless, so if we're always talking about it as being for women and that's about returning to work from pregnancy, where's the benefit for everyone else? If we can look at it as creating flexibility so people can thrive based on life stage, it means it accommodates people that might have a chronic illness or an acute illness, accommodates people that might be aging in the workforce. There are so many benefits. So someone that might be Indigenous and then they might be having to attend sorry business, whatever else it might be, there's so much benefit to that flexible working. You mentioned it earlier, and I don't want to forget, I often get from feedback from people in workshops when we're looking at getting people's needs met in the workplace. And when we look at aging, a lot of people say that they get overlooked for development opportunities, career discussions, when really what you're saying is the exact opposite should be happening. If we continue to keep them in the career development conversation, we get to leverage their skills for longer, support them in their transition, and do knowledge transfer. If we're not having the conversation, we're not in the room.
The perception needs to change that retiring or looking to retire from the workplace doesn't mean you're retiring from life. Far from it. You're actually looking at the new opportunities that are going to come as a result of you having more time to do it. And you might choose to do that with organizations. Do you know what? Organizations are losing a big opportunity here by waiving their, retiring employees goodbye. There's a wonderful article written by a woman called Kathy Lowe, and it's called The Crone in the Corner Office. And she says business needs more crones. Because you know what? Women over 50, historically, they're referred to as crones or hags. Can you believe that?
Did you say over 50?
Yes.
Oh, shit.
I know.
Too young to be a hag.
I know. And then science, when you look at science, it refers to over 50 being kind of, the stage of disintegration. I'm sorry, it is not. It is the stage of enlightenment and excitement.
people that are listening that are on the cusp of 50, just after 50, having this conversation has literally, the idea of being a hag has brought on a hot flush.
Yes. Oh,
There you
but
go.
it's, yeah. But it's, this article that Kathy has written, it just talks about the being left out of conversations and not being invited to meetings about the future of business. And we're not talking about sort of just strategic meetings on, what products are we going to release and pricing, that type of thing, commercial stuff. It is the future of business. And as you know, and as all of the listeners know, business is changing exponentially with AI, coming to the fore. But the human element of business will never go away. And the human element of business is one of the most complex to navigate and to keep motivated. And key to that is learning and development.
Absolutely. And if you think about the tenure of an older employee, they're less likely to be jumping around and going from organization to organization because they're not seeking out that constant promotion. So invest in them, leverage them. But I want to look at the whole of you and not just the current you, because I want to tap into a bit of your lived experience where you shared with me in advance the story of failing your HSC. And well, then actually, let's just start there. When you fail your
Mm.
HSC, and for those that are listening, it's the equivalent of wherever you are, your final exams when you finish high school prior to getting into university. And it's the results that you get that give you access to university. So let's clarify that for everybody. What does that do to you? Did you expect to fail?
I chose subjects that I knew marked well or scored well, but I didn't enjoy them. Now, why did I do that? Why did I choose subjects like science, maths? They all score really well in HSC. But here's the thing, they score well if you
Do well.
love the subject. I didn't do well. I didn't do well at all because those subjects were the ones that would have given me the majority of my marks, but I scored really badly on them. And so I essentially, left with a fail. And my parents said, okay, they were always supportive no matter what. They said, you will find your path no matter what. So they said, you can't do nothing. What do you want to do? And I said, oh, I don't know. And they said, look, why don't you go to business college and learn some really kind of basic skills that will be lifelong useful skills. So I went to business college and I learned typing and shorthand and bookkeeping, all of those topics, those very practical subjects that took me to working in a law firm. And so I worked as a secretary in a law firm and I did that for a few years. But to cut the very long story short, because it is a very long story short, I was also in a very toxic relationship at that time. And that toxic relationship was one that never encouraged me and always told me that I probably essentially wouldn't amount to much. And every time I tried to embark on new learning, I went back to university to study French. And the person I was with at the time said, oh, why are you bothering? Keep doing what you're doing and don't strive for more.
Be satisfied with your place in life, Jenny.
Very much.
Tap on the
Yeah,
head.
yeah, that's very much what it was like. And anyway, this toxic relationship became more and more toxic and it ended. And to get away from that relationship, because I kept going back to it and thinking I could make it better and fix it. The only way I could get away from it was to take myself overseas. Flew over to London and worked in London for a year as a legal secretary. During that period, I had a long contract role with a senior partner in one of London's entertainment law firms. And his name is Claude Fielding. And he took me under his wing, really. I worked for him. I loved the work. He was entertainment law, so we were doing a lot of movie production work. We were doing a lot of Broadway musical contracts, and I had access to some really interesting people. Claude took me under his wing. He had to take a period of time off for illness, like 2 months, and During that time, I stayed with the firm and worked with the other lawyers just to make sure his practice kept ticking along. And I built a strong relationship with the clients and made sure that everything was done for Claude while he was away so he could come back and feel as though he was stepping back into something other than chaos. And he came back and he sat me down and he said, Jenny, what do you want to do with your life? He said, you're a great secretary. And he said, if that's what you love doing, keep doing it. But he said, you've clearly got a passion for law. And he said, I'm curious as to why you didn't pursue that. And I said, well, there ain't no university in the world that's going to take on somebody who's failed their high school certificate. And I said, especially Australia. He gave me an envelope before I left. When I came back to Australia, he said, I want you to go back. And he said, I don't want you to open this envelope. But he said, in this envelope is something. And he said, I want you to go and enroll, put in an application at university to study law. And he said, I want you to let me know what happens. So I went back, and University of Technology Sydney at the time were accepting mature age students, which I was at the time. I was 23. And lo and behold, I got a letter from UTS saying, we're going to admit you on the basis of the letter that Claude Fielding had written to say, I believe in her. And this is what she has achieved in the short time she's been working with me. And I believe that she's got a great future ahead of her if you will just give her a chance.
The power of mentoring, the power of advocacy, the power of someone having the belief in you and taking action to demonstrate that can change a person's life, in which case it did for you.
It was so exciting when I got my degree. I flew over to London, and it's the first person I went to see was Claude. And I went in, and this is before the days of, internet and emails and stuff. So he didn't even know I was coming. I made an appointment, an anonymous appointment, and I went in and I showed him my degree, and just, the tears welled up in his eyes. And he just said, I'm so proud of you. His way of celebrating what I had achieved was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. It meant so much. It makes me teary now thinking about it.
Claps for Claude.
Yeah, go Claude. And the interesting thing is, 30 years later, I've bumped into his daughter who now lives in Australia. But I think the lesson for me, Liz, was that, but for that failure at school, I might not be where I am now. I would not. It's not I may not. I would not be where I am now, because had I passed my HSC, I don't know what I would have done, to be honest. Whereas the failure and living through that toxic relationship and learning that I'm not going to be told what I can and can't achieve. And then having someone other than my parents and my family who, naturally they believe in you, but having someone like Claude Fielding, who is so well known in the field, and having him say to me, I believe in you and I believe you can do this. It meant so much.
When I was listening to you at the beginning saying, when you reach a certain age as a woman, you just start to speak your truth. And it is liberating, but why do women have to wait so long when men, as a generalization, tend to have a really high self-belief and they just are that from the get-go?
Yeah, look, I don't know why that is, Liz. And I think one thing that, again, we can be doing and workplaces can be doing is to look at other cultures where women are so highly, elderly women are so highly revered and respected, and their wisdom is sought out. The cultures that embrace that and revere that understand the importance of experience and of having lived life, and the wisdom that somebody that has lived life can share. How can we take that and build that into our culture so that not only elderly women, but elderly people are given the opportunity, are shown the respect that they have earned over many, many years of treading sometimes a very difficult path and having navigated life's journey. What can we do to bring that perception of elders into our own culture.
Like I like the idea of the way you've described the aging process, the increase in value. You know, it's like you've put something in the bank and it continues to compound interest with age, right? Because of the wisdom
Yeah.
that you, but then it brings to mind that thought that I often hear women say that there's a point in their life where they've gone, I suddenly started to feel like I was being overlooked or I became invisible. Have you
Mhm.
encountered that, or do you have any friends that have shared that with
Mhm.
you?
Yeah, look, I've felt it less as I've gotten older, but yeah, I certainly felt it after I had um, the twins. I felt that before I even walked out of the office to give birth to the twins. You know, I worked until 2 weeks before they were born for fear of, losing my place at the table.
Mm.
It was made very clear to me that my role would change. It was made very clear to me that whereas once I'd traveled the world with my job and worked closely with law enforcement authorities and UN organisations in the area of sort of counterfeiting and intellectual property protection, it was made very clear to me that you won't be able to do that once you've had the kids. So I was told. They didn't say, they didn't ask, Jenny, we understand you're going to have different priorities, but do you think you'll still be able to do this after you've had kids? And what could we do to leverage your experience and the relationships that you've built with all of these people on behalf of the business? What can we do to make it work for you? None of that.
So, how old are your twins now?
They've just turned 21.
I wanted to ask for our listeners because you might look at Jenny and apply your conscious or unconscious bias, but let's just call it bias for what it is, and go on, that was a while ago. That wouldn't happen anymore. But it absolutely still happens that we place these assumptions, and it means that we're actually it's like the person's value has diminished overnight. Our pay shouldn't be less. The role that we're able to do, should we choose to do it, shouldn't change. It's so difficult to navigate when it's invisible as well, a lot of the time.
Let me tell you, I worked twice as hard as a mum than I ever did before I had the kids.
I think if I think back to when my kids were little and I was doing the dance where you were dropping them off at 5 minutes past 7 when daycare opened, and you were picking them up at 5 minutes to 6 when daycare closed because you were rushing to the train and you were juggling everything, and you worked your ass off to prove that you were worth it when you're in the office. I don't think it should be underestimated how much commitment that we'll put into an organization. But, I think back to some roles, they didn't deserve it. Without going into my own stories, I go, why did I spend all that time giving it to them when I should have given it to my kids? Because they didn't value it in the end.
Yeah. But then what we're finding now for my generation is that there's this need for grandparents to
Mm.
be looking after grandkids. So it's almost, the new iteration of maternity leave or the need for flexibility to look after grandkids. I have friends that are. And so they're kind of going through it for a second time now.
Yeah.
They're saying, oh, I had to face this when I had my own kids, and now I'm having to face it with my grandkids, and I want to help my kids.
Yeah.
So, and the only way I can help my kids who can't afford childcare is to ask my employer for time off to help look after my grandkids. Now, again, this comes down to not only corporate company policy making and honouring those policies, but governments and their policy making and their provision of support and access to help for people in this stage of life so that we can keep young people in the workforce
Yeah.
while their kids are being looked after by a loving grandparent.
You bring up such a great point around government policy, because if you think about it, if you're contributing to childcare as a grandparent, even if you're still working in the workforce, so let's say you want to balance that part-time, which enables another person, being the parents of the children, being able to be in the workforce, it takes load off the childcare system as well. But the policy isn't just related to that. It translates itself across all those other identities that can benefit from that. So those people that are primary carers for people with a disability, or with parents that are aging that need more care at home. I mean, that's why inclusion isn't about labels. Like, we're just really highlighting it. It is just about need, so that we
Yeah.
can meet our needs.
Going back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, you know, these needs change, our identities change and evolve over time. We need to recognize that we are born with certain identities, but as we grow, as we change, as we adapt, we need to be given permission
Mm.
for our identities to change. And so, you know, I felt that the one thing I did feel at work over the past few years, I did feel reticent about talking about how old I was because I didn't want to be labeled.
Mm.
And so I would do everything I could to avoid talking about this, you know, the big 6-0 approaching. I think I felt like that because I didn't want to be made to feel old. But I wish I had, because I think I could have been that kind of, oh, wow, okay, so you're still doing that at 60, and wow, you're still playing netball. And I kind of wish I had now bragged about my age and the fact that I'm still, you know, I can still party with the, you know, you youngsters.
You're making me think about my mum, and the importance of representation. So she too, so she didn't retire until into her 70s. She was still working full time. And she too hid her age to the point that she, in her last role, didn't apply for a corporate credit card because it would require her to put her date of birth on the form.
Yeah.
And I do remember her saying to me, it was coming up to her 70th birthday, and she'd said something maybe around it being a milestone. They go, oh, is it like your 60th? And in her brain, she's like, I wish, but never, and just let people think that. But really, she should have stood up and owned it for representation. But I get it. You don't want to be, because when people apply their assumptions, 70, you should have retired years ago. What are you doing? So you did allude to before that you're actually starting a new career. So you're saying that
Mm.
you're in your 60s, or you're 60, let's just call it, in that decade, and you're starting a new career. What is that?
I am coaching.
Okay.
And again, I have COVID to thank for that, because I had long service leave during COVID. And of course, you know, you couldn't do much by way of travel. And so I decided to do a certification in leadership and organizational coaching to kind of just keep my mind stimulated and to have something to do. You know, I'm now doing two postgrad diplomas, one in health and wellbeing coaching and another in team and leadership coaching. And I'm absolutely loving this because it's keeping me engaged with the workforce, but on my terms. And it's also enabling me to continue to feel as though I'm bringing something of value. And if I can, through coaching, help people to change their mindset and open up opportunities that they had not otherwise have thought about. Oh wow, you know, that really it just excites me. And so this is kind of, I'm looking at retirement as really not retirement. This is about ramping up again and really doing something I feel incredibly passionate about.
Are you specializing in any particular area of coaching? Because you did mention you're studying health and wellness as well.
Look, I'm doing predominantly career coaching, leadership coaching, and just organizational coaching. But health and wellness, health and well-being, yeah, I'm finding that fascinating because it does go into, you know, the uh, physical health and mental health as well. And I feel that, again, you know, COVID has taught us so many lessons about the importance of mental health, not only in life generally, but within a corporate environment. And I think if I can bring that into my coaching for corporate clients, I think that will be very, very important. If I can bring it into sessions with my clients that are transitioning into different parts, you know, different aspects of life. I've got a couple of clients who are transitioning to retirement. Health and wellbeing needs to be part of that.
I mean, if you don't have your physical or mental health, you have nothing. Nothing
Mm.
can exist without it in life. And until you don't have it, sometimes it's hard to recognize that. I'm going to put all of your contact details in the podcast description so people can reach out and get in contact with you if they'd love to work with you as a coach. Thank you for your time today.
It's wonderful to see you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk.